Hey guys, welcome back. We, as always, are going to start with a viral clip. So let's get started with this one.
I don't give a damn about what happens to my data. This tweet is blowing up online. And it's actually a sentiment shared by a lot of people. I have nothing to hide, and data just leads to more targeted ads. So what's wrong with that? It's not so much about the data that you willingly share, your location, interests. It's also about the things you aren't intentionally sharing. Your IQ level, your self-esteem, relationship status, sexual interests, emotional well-being, the family relationships, every single thing you do online. The websites you visit, the speed you type, the amount of spelling errors you make, how long it takes you to read a page. If you check your bank account balance before you go and buy something, build a manual of your life and who you are, and combined with the data of millions of others used to nudge you and persuade you in ways you don't realize and impact the opportunities you get and don't get. For example, insurance companies buy a lot of this data. Universities do, which impacts admissions. Types of job opportunities you may or may not get shown online. For mortgage rates, the more data companies have on us, the greater the risk of harm in the event of a data leak. Don't confuse not having any secrets with the need for privacy.
Yeah. What do you think? That's so scary. Very scary. Well, I don't know who that post was from. It's a lawyer talking. But I identify with the sentiment underlying it very much, which is don't think that this isn't a big deal. Yeah. I mean, it is a big deal. Totally a big deal. I mean, but the fact that she said, universities, you would think that that's where perhaps some justice is served and it's based off of your own merit. How it can impact you is kind of crazy. But the idea of somebody not caring about data, I can see it from that perspective too, because we were just having a conversation earlier about Siri and, the fact that basically, so I don't have Siri enabled on my phone just because I think it's kind of creepy, where it's always listening, or Alexa, where it was always listening. If you are with somebody who has it enabled on their phone, then essentially it's listening to you, or the Ring, where you might have it in your home and it's watching you do literally everything to some degree, even the camera on your phone. I mean, I had a friend that was a hacker and he wanted to know where his daughter was because she went to a concert. So he basically hacked into the cameras around her to see where she was and spy on her that way. Which is so
love that the hackers are dads now.
Dads, right? Exactly. But it's crazy, right? So it's people don't even realize how much they're being watched to some degree. So, guys, welcome. As you can tell, our conversation today is going to be centralized around privacy and data and understanding exactly what privacy is and what data is. What is data? Where is it going? And we want to figure out ways, and we have a wonderful guest here who's going to talk about it, to protect ourselves in this ever-changing world. So welcome to the podcast. I'm Alia Kizildash. I'm your host, and this podcast is Alia & Co., where we talk about complex things and we make them simple. I want to introduce this wonderful guest who I would say, especially right now when it comes to AI, privacy, anything around governance, the law is so out there. Nobody even knows what is allowed right now. So, Lisa, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Lisa Gavin. I am an attorney. I founded my own firm last year. It's called Data Steward PLLC. My office is in Schaumburg, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, and I serve clients all over the country, but I'm licensed as an attorney both in Illinois and in Colorado. My practice is founded on basic business law principles. I have a business law background, including having worked as a general counsel for cryptocurrency and ransomware settlement services organization here in Chicago. So that foundation is all the basics of business law. Spinning up an entity, dissolving an entity, merging, getting a trademark. But I specialize in what's called data governance. And data governance is an umbrella term that covers really 4 main subtopics. They are privacy, cybersecurity, AI governance, and then ADA compliance, which is a little bit different than the first 3 in that it speaks specifically to accessibility for those who may have some challenges in the areas of seeing or hearing, but still implicates the use of data 100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty amazing. And especially because there's so much confusion right now with regards to all of those topics. I think that technology in itself is always changing before we figure it out and we're like, oh, we're good. I get this now. Changes again and changes again and changes again. So consistently, there is so much information coming to us, but also it's also taking so much information from us as well. And so, for those of you, let's just start very grassroots right at the beginning. What is data?
Sure. So data, and this is a new definition. Data,
Recent?
well, personal data anyway, right? Personal data and sensitive personal data have taken on specific definitions in the law over the course of the last decade or so.
Okay.
And so if we want to break it down even further to answer your question, specifically, what is data? Data is any type of information about a specific subject. That could be a person, that could be your dog, that could be an entity like a business or a government. And pieces of information don't necessarily have to be things that you can distill down into print, but nevertheless can maybe be broken down into more and more discrete pieces until you're ultimately left with singular parts of a concept or singular parts of, in the case of written data, say, an address.
Okay. So that's what I was going to, in terms of breaking down, like examples of those things. It could be an address. What else could it be? Like where's...
So back to the defined concepts of personal data and sensitive personal data. And these are defined slightly differently by the different laws that use them. But it tends to be defined as personal data. I mean, any information about a human data subject that, when combined with any other information about them, identifies a natural person. So, for example, your name is Alia Kizilbash. The chances that there is another Alia Kizilbash on the planet are...
Actually, there is someone that has the same name that gets invited to all the parties that I should be attending. Here in Chicago? Somewhere around here in Chicago.
That is wild. I can't believe it. Yeah, okay.
They're like, we invited you. No, you didn't.
Okay, well, let's pick a more unusual name.
No, but we understand, though.
The point is, you are more easily identifiable as a natural person with any of the unique elements of data that an entity might have about you, because your name is so different from the general populace. If you were David Smith, then we would certainly need something more specific about you, or maybe 2 or 3 more pieces of information about you to make sure that we were talking to or inviting the right David Smith to our party.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. It was a Facebook thing. Not on Facebook anymore.
And then just to close like the loop on the discussion, right? Sensitive personal data. I didn't really even get through the whole list, but it's like name, address, email address, your the town that you live in, your zip code, your county, your phone number, all of these little bits that we tend to think of as our contact information. There's another layer of personal information, or as it's sometimes called, personal data, that's called sensitive personal information. And this is things like your health status, or your sexual orientation, or whether or not you might have some criminal history or things like that.
Okay.
And so as I suppose more like broad response to your question, and you only asked what is data, but the definition of data is changing all the time. Every time a legislature gets lobbied hard enough or considers a new case that came up that deals with a novel piece of data that hasn't maybe previously been identified to be sensitive, then the wheels of our democracy start turning, and eventually, for example, California adds a new sensitive data element to its law.
Wow. So, and just trying to kind of wrap my mind around it, because yes, sensitive data, you think anything that's HIPAA kind of compliant or regulated or whatever, that's definitely different, right? Your financial records, your bank account information, all of it, like brokerage, whatever, investments, those things are sensitive information. But also there are sensitive pieces of information that have not been defined yet, which is so intriguing because, in the video as we were watching, it was just your disposition. Are you happy?
Do you have a disability?
Do you have a disability is a big one.
Right.
But I feel like that's something that should be covered, right? You would think that, right? So that's interesting is that it's not.
Not everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. So, but even perhaps behind the scenes, how, or if you're checking your bank account before you shop, that means perhaps maybe you're one, or something. There's also things that you can imply based off of the things that you are asking or typing in or whatever about how happy you are in a relationship, or even sexually, that it was saying is that it knows things. So those aren't completely defined as sensitive information yet. So hence they're not something that you can protect.
They're not regulated yet. So what that means is not that you can't protect them. In fact, that's what I'm here to do. Even in the absence of regulatory requirements, right? So let's think about it like this. Let's say I get a client who's here in Illinois, and their business is only in Illinois right now. I'm still going to be recommending to them that they follow California's lead when they make decisions about data governance. Why? Because whatever California is doing is coming for us next. Not necessarily 100% of the time, but it's about best practice. Are we really going to do this 50 plus different ways when you take into account different territories and stuff? No, we're going to work towards the hopefully greatest common denominator. So we only have to do it the one time.
Okay. I want to take a historical little kind of off route for a little bit, just so people can understand where we're at when it comes to our rights in terms of protection. I know that there's in Europe actually, where with California, the precedent starts there to some degree because they do have their shit in order to some degree.
Better than we do.
Better than we do, right? And so that committee or that entity is called in Europe?
The European Commission, right? And so then the European Commission passed a law that's called the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And that was passed in the early 2010s. It's gone through a lot of litigation testing it, but is still holding pretty strong.
Okay. And the stance there is on protection, data protection?
That your data is yours. It belongs to you. And if any entity is going to try to make a buck or a euro, I guess, off of it, then they need to tell you what they're going to do with the data and give you the ability to basically take it back, no matter how big the entity is. And no matter how small the data subject might be.
Do you find that it's easy there? Do they make it easy?
Oh, no, it's not easy at all. Okay. And what do I mean by that? Let's be clear. The framework is more precise and better tested than anything we have here by a long shot. It's older. I just said it's been going through these rounds of litigation that span years. So when I say it's not easier, I mean, if you're a business owner in Europe, it's not very easy to comply with GDPR.
Why, though? Is it because, and again, with the cookies?
Sure, right. Because the requirements of the GDPR and subsequently California's law and other state laws like it like I mentioned a minute ago, basically tell you, you have to say, what are you doing with this information and how can you take it back? The way that we all started experiencing how this really works in practice was when, you all will remember this, January 1st, 2023, you woke up, you pulled up whichever non-banking, non-healthcare app you use the most often, and there at the footer was this little pop-up that said, let me ask you some questions about cookies. And you thought to yourself, what are you talking about? What is a cookie? I'm full of holiday cookies, but like, why are we talking about cookies now?
I have not had enough.
Right, trying to serve me more cookies. I'm just trying to go to Instagram or whatever it is. And in the interim, we've seen it so many times, whatever your default response is now, like you have your response, whether it's accept all cookies or reject. Way, way back when the GDPR was being passed, what they said was you have to tell folks what you're doing with their data. Well, what are you doing with their data? You're tagging it, you're collecting it, you're tracking it with cookies or their little sister pixels. And in the GDPR, and again, in all these subsequent laws, since users have to agree to what you're doing with their data before they give you their data, a key point of these laws is that you have to ask for the consent at or before the point of collection of the data. You can't ask forgiveness. You have to ask permission. Is that if you ask for that, or rather I should say, if you don't agree, then you're saying, okay, I'm not going to use this website. But if you do agree, then now the business has to respect your choices, right? They're either going to not track your behavior, or they are, based on what you've agreed to, how you flip those little toggles about functional versus necessary, whatever cookies. And so now that we're however many, almost 15 years past the original passage of the GDPR, states in the US are starting to recognize too, like our constituents should have these rights as well. We don't want, as a policy matter, for businesses to be able to just make billions on the backs of this personal data, especially where they might not be protecting it very well. And that's back to your point about how do we protect it.
Interesting. And so that's where I kind of wanted to lay the framework of, I think a lot of times there is always some, the cache, clear the cache and the cookies, And I do remember when I first was exposed to it, it was a lot harder to use the website. I mean, to be honest, like sometimes you wouldn't even be able to get in or whatever. And in some ways, do you think that was a troubleshooting thing? Or I don't know if it's after I spoke to you that it just seemed easier because I had more awareness about what it was. I think that initially, and maybe I'm not claiming to be knowledgeable in any capacity, but I think that initially when I saw it, I was like, maybe some of these are necessary. Like maybe I need to have these cookies. Maybe the website won't function, right? Like in my mind, that's what I thought. But clearly it will function. It's just that it won't function off of your information.
Right. So you've just hit kind of the nail on the head of one of the biggest issues that California and other states are dealing with right now. Let's talk about the different types of cookies that there are. So when you are put upon by one of these pop-ups and it says accept all, reject all, or like choose my cookies, manage cookies. If you're accepting all of them, imagine just all of those toggles going to on. What does that mean? It means that all the different categories of cookies that are applicable on the site that you're using are going to function while you're navigating that website. So if you go into a manage cookies link, it will typically break it down for you. 3 or 4 different types of cookies. One of them is always going to be on. It's the strictly necessary or necessary cookies toggle. That's to your previous point. Without this one, it won't function. These are functional cookies that are here to make the web developers who run it on the back end know how people use the website at a generic level, not to track you like we were talking about behavioral, like profiling, so much as does it work when she clicks continue? Does it render the page that it's supposed to render? Or if she comes back and she's already created an account, do we send her to the login page versus the create an account page? None of that is really nefarious. Yeah, that's okay. You want those cookies. And in fact, it won't work without them. Yeah. So that's the point. On top of the strictly necessary cookies, you might find other functional cookies that are a little bit more about the aesthetics of how the tool works. And then sometimes you'll see a toggle for things like marketing or analytics. This is one of the ones that you can turn off because if you don't want them to track your behavior, for example, you know how when you go shopping, like on Costco's website or something, and you look at an item but you don't put it in your cart, and then somehow you get an email that says, "Psst, were you still looking at this red coat?" That email comes to you because you've agreed, hopefully, to allow whatever the entity is to use analytics cookies or marketing cookies to track your behavior and market to you with them.
So every time you need to ask them, like, so for example, if I have like say the Costco account, so anytime I go back in there, like, does the website need to ask you permission every single time?
It shouldn't have to, no. So this is a tricky thing for the developers who run websites, but most of the people who are watching this podcast are probably not those folks. But what it should be able to do, unless you've cleared your cookies, is recognize that you've been there before. So you've already told it what your preferences are. That being said, it should also, by law, easily provide you a way to go back and change your mind.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't want you to keep using these cookies.
But it's not easy, though, I feel like. I feel like that's something that is hyper confusing. I mean, where do you even go into?
The terms of service or the privacy policy, sometimes those are one document smashed together. More often than not, they're two separate documents, but buried in the legalese towards the bottom of one or the other of those documents. If you want to make changes, there should be directions on how. So it'll either be a link to a privacy settings page that you then can go in and control your settings.
Even if you don't have a login?
I don't know. Well, I guess that depends on the entity, right? Because if you have not signed up for an account, let me think about this. If you've not signed up for an account for something, so I'll make it up. Let's say Crate and Barrel. I go buy a wedding present and I check out as a guest. My privacy preferences should still be something that I can change. I think what they'll do, I would imagine, in most cases, and I've definitely seen this before, so I really shouldn't even say I would imagine, is they'll make you fill out another form. What's your email address, right? Well, but also, on the other hand, if you do have an account, then it's just going to make it easier for you, right? So like it kind of, so at least there's a little bit of a trade-off, right? And then I don't make any particular recommendations about these. I don't even really know what the names of them are because I can take control of this stuff myself. But there are tools out there that will help you scrape the web for your personal data and work on taking it down for you.
Oh, wow. So it's not a firm, it's a tool. You can actually...
There are lots of them, actually, software tools.
Interesting. Well, okay. All right. Okay. That's good to know because I think that maybe things have shifted. I don't know. I'm just like a normal person.
No, you're right.
I'm that way. I'm not thinking about...
You'll see these with like Instagram influencers, for example. So like, I'll just throw one out there. Do you know who Jen Hamilton is? She's a nurse. She's a young mom. She's blonde. She's very funny. Anyway, sometimes she'll do like a sponsored post for one of these take it down type tools because her face, voice, likeness, like everything gets spoofed all the time. People try to sell things under her name. So with respect to taking more control of how these companies may or may not use your data, you have control at the outset, like we were talking about, when you're asked whether or not you want the website to use cookies to track your behavior. This is a point of particular litigation right now because, for example, let's just talk about user experience flow really fast, right? So like when you make a decision on a website and there's two choices like okay and cancel, most of the time the UX developer, the user experience expert has said, we're going to take the action that we want the user to do and make it bolder. We're going to call it out in a color, right? Whether or not that's to leave cancel sort of grayed or what have you. And a lot of the times, the colors of those buttons will change when and whether you've completed certain prerequisite checkboxes or other tasks in a form. So when it comes to your privacy rights and your cookie selections, if you can believe this, there's litigation going on right now about what color those buttons should be. Because you're going to pick the dark blue button, whether it says okay or reject all cookies, because that's how your brain works.
But then also in those instances where you might, like, where it says go on or whatever, and then you have to search for not wanting it, right? Like they'll make the X really small, cancel or whatever.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So long as they're actually doing it, right, providing what it says as according to regulation, then, even though they're tricking you otherwise, I think it just becomes like this strange situation. So
that's the argument that entities like the California Privacy Protection Agency are having once a month or once a quarter, where representatives from the community will come and say, folks who are colorblind are substantially impacted by decisions like this. Folks who maybe manage their own finances but are not particularly savvy at that and who are more inclined to choose what they feel like is a default. How often is accept all cookies the darkest, brightest, bottom right, move next option, right? That's what they want you to do.
Exactly.
So
for a better experience, click all cookies.
Pro tip, if it seems like it's easy to get through the workflow, they're probably collecting your data.
Oh, wow. Wow. Now, okay, so when it comes to cookies, you say no to all the cookies. Maybe you said yes. Now, even after you leave the website, is it possible for them to be continuously tracking everywhere you're going after?
No, not after you leave their website.
Oh, okay.
So the website is being hosted by WordPress, Squarespace, pick your web host. And the instance that you're running, the account that you hold for that website, is the only space that you have visibility into, unless you've contracted with another third-party vendor, say, to watch other behavior.
Okay.
Other places.
So now let's get into the third-party vendoring. And let's even be clearer here. Instagram is collecting, Meta, everyone is collecting. You by default accepted that they can use all of your cookies. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
It's not totally accurate. So what you're letting Meta and Facebook use is, well, by default, is whatever they have turned on. Let me just pause and say, this is a real crux issue. Privacy by default is becoming a term of art in the development space to refer to the concept of design, or rather, I should say, development that trends towards fully locked down privacy for the consumer as the baseline, and that changes must be made to reduce that level of privacy, as opposed to the way that it kind of works in the US right now, which is not privacy by default, the absence of privacy by default.
Is Instagram operating differently in Europe then?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to off the top of my head. Their requirements under the GDPR are their requirements under the GDPR, meaning the fact that they make a bunch of money is irrelevant versus like my business or your business. But the rights of the European citizens under the law that their parliament has passed are different, which may mean that Meta in Europe, and I really would have to look into this, is obligated to do its development differently. The GDPR has a privacy by default-ish bent. That's basically what I said earlier, right? Like we want everybody to have these rights, no matter how little of a guy you are, in quotes. The conflict, I guess, comes in the fact that many of these businesses are international. So your question points directly to the crux of the problem. Is this entity running 7 different forms of their website in the different parts of the world? In most cases, right now, mostly. The reason for that is that the laws that have been passed to regulate the way that data transfers work internationally are also new. They're also changing all the time. And so it really depends when you ask that question. It kind of like the answer is it depends on who's running the system.
It's complicated.
What country are they in? Yeah, right.
So, there was this announcement on the 16th where Meta can now have access to all of your DMs. Is that private information, or just because by knowing that you're putting it into that site, you should just know that it's not private? Same as like the whole launch of Snapchat. Initially, people thought, hey, I could,
say stuff and it's going to disappear.
It's going to go away. Whereas now we all know, or may not know. I mean, and maybe this for kids who are listening or anybody that might be, that it has not disappeared. Yes, it might have disappeared from your, I guess, what I wouldn't say workflow, but just kind of your experience.
Yeah, or your sphere of access, maybe. Yeah, right.
But outside of that, the company will always have that information, even if you have deleted it.
The answer to your question is an even bigger it depends than I've said so far, because Meta also is integrated with other tools, right? So like maybe you're reaching Meta through a LinkedIn integration, in which case then we've got to talk about LinkedIn's requirements.
So in terms of with Meta, right, so we know now that maybe whatever you're putting into that website in terms of your direct messages or the comments that you're making, because those are comments that you're electively putting in for the public to see, right? So that that's not going to go away, right? I mean, and maybe even if you delete it, will it go away? If you write maybe you were in a bad mood, maybe you're cranky one day and you wrote this horrendous comment on somebody who probably didn't even deserve it. And just you were one of those, what is it, the keyboard warriors one night, and you decided that you were just going to let them know it, right? Just because, I don't know. And you go back and delete it. Can you even delete it, to be honest? I feel like now you can't delete comments, or can you?
So your question is answerable in several parts, unfortunately. There's not a simple answer. But to try to keep it short, you can delete it from the public-facing instance of Facebook, at least right now, right? Facebook will currently allow you to remove a post that you've previously made. You can delete a comment, or you can delete a post altogether. The question I think you may not know you're asking is, does it disappear forever from everywhere? And the answer to that is certainly not. So I'd like to try to answer the why does that happen, if you'll allow me to take it from the why do businesses keep the data question. Right. Okay. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time explaining why data is valuable. I think that the listeners of your podcast are smart enough. They get that. As far as your maybe desired removed data, the stuff that you would like to have disappear, pictures from when you were in high school or something that aren't flattering, doesn't even have to be necessarily something sinister, right? Just because a public-facing website doesn't host that information anymore doesn't mean that it's disappeared from everywhere forever, as I just said, because the internet is not just comprised of public-facing websites. There are lots and lots of websites that you would never visit because they're hosted internally at Chase or McDonald's,
Portal.
whatever. Right. This isn't public internet. It's privately hosted intranet, right? Exactly. But even still, there are further websites that you just wouldn't even, they don't get indexed, right? You wouldn't find them in a Google search. And when a business does a contract with another business, one of the terms that is in that agreement is almost always about what happens when we break up. If we break up, we have to look at what we call our termination clause. In the termination clause or in a data protection clause, there's usually something in there about when we're done, you're going to take all the copies of everything that you have of ours and you're going to delete them. Except for a copy that you can keep for legal and compliance purposes. Businesses aren't deleting their data because they need to keep it for legal and compliance purposes. If a business is going to tell you that it's going to delete your data, you should be asking significantly more questions about how are you going to delete my data? Are there copies of my data going to be stored somewhere other than this system, etc.? So be curious about
We're going to
what you're hearing.
Data. I'd be like, great.
Thank you.
But actually, that's a red flag then. I mean, so the 23andMe, what was it? No, there was another kind of company that, was it 23andMe?
Had a breach recently?
Not the breach. I think that they were going out of business.
Oh, okay. I think they're still in business, but I don't know.
Yeah, there at some point there was, and it said, please request your information before, this and that or something, or tell them, you have to kind of opt in to tell them to not delete it so that you can, because otherwise they'll sell it off to third parties and you don't know where it's going. And especially because it's like ancestral information that might, kind of like they could sell
impact your health insurance.
Exactly. There you go. So that's the thing. It's just such a mess. I feel like these corporations, they make it hard on purpose just so, and to not understand the scope of it. So yes, so deleting it, if they say you're deleting the information, not a good thing because they're not, how are they deleting it? And are they making copies before they delete it?
Right.
Technically, they're not deleting it then.
That's your Snapchat example.
Yeah.
Right? Or when ChatGPT was recently ordered by a court to preserve all of its outputs. I mean, first of all, think about how many hundreds of millions of outputs that probably is.
Why would it?
Because we aren't going to let you delete the evidence of potential crimes. We have no idea.
That's where it's coming from. It's not safety.
Absolutely. There's no way that we're going to let you delete the evidence of all of this stuff. Let's give, I love to give an example. Let's give an example. I'm a horrible person who has evil intent. I'm going to try to not use something really tone deaf. I have evil intent to go deface a national monument. And I start throwing into ChatGPT, make me a plan to go deface Mount Rushmore. And ChatGPT, being malleable as it is, after it protests a few times, says, all right, fine. Here's how you go deface whatever. That output is evidence of steps in furtherance of a crime.
Yeah.
So we're not going to let OpenAI just delete evidence. It's the same as when you sue your boss for retaliatory discharge, and he has to turn over not only all of his emails, but all of the metadata that shows whether he deleted any of his emails. We're not going to remove the paper trail or the data trail. Man, should we make a podcast called Data Trail?
I think
That might be good.
Oh, interesting. Oh my gosh. But hey, okay, wait. So here, let me understand this. So I'm thinking here that the reason why the government wants to preserve this information is because it wants to preserve it wants to know what was put in so that other people can't come and manipulate it. That's what I would think.
How sweet.
Sweet of me to think that way, because no, it actually wants to call us out on maybe one day I was joking around with my friends. It's like, I want to kill my husband.
Well, now, I think that's not what I said.
No, what I'm saying is this is a hypothetical.
Sure.
Tell me how that would not work.
Sure. Well, first of all, you haven't killed your husband, so we're not looking for evidence of the fact that you've done it.
Oh, okay. So it would be like retroactive.
Right. I mean, like, this podcast is not about surveillance. Government surveillance is a whole other podcast. If you want to talk about that, that's like a whole other thing. But my point is, right, you're thinking about it as, well, are they going to be watching me as I'm doing this? Maybe. I don't know whether or not ChatGPT has teammates who are designated, or probably bots designated to search for keywords or whatever. I couldn't tell you that. Maybe they have a relationship with the FBI. Maybe they don't. What I will tell you is that the founders of Firefly's AI, that note-taking app, recently admitted that they were just sitting in people's meetings, taking notes by hand, pretending to be a computer. And if that's not a violation of privacy,
Yeah.
I don't know what is.
Firefly AI is a very common note-taker app.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, a lot of this is mind-blowing. I think I just want to kind of, because I could just keep asking. Sure, I have tons more other questions. First off, mind-blowing that the government doesn't actually care about us. It just wants to get us caught in the act.
Parts of the government do. I mean, it's not like every senator is saying, let's surveil all American citizens.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. But as far as the judge who issued the order, that's a precautionary measure. That's like, whoa.
It's like you subpoena somebody.
Yeah.
I go search for it.
Right.
It's not, but the trend here is upward.
We're not going to start publishing these things, or we shouldn't. On the other hand,
Could that even happen?
it sure could. Don't you remember a couple of months ago that people's ChatGPT searches were showing up in Google results?
Well, that's if you don't toggle off, or maybe
But that's my point, is did you think that when you toggled off that all the data disappears? It still gets kept. It just gets flagged in a spreadsheet as like, don't show this. It's as easy as clicking select column, turn on to show all of this.
Okay, but just the protection here is that if you have toggled off, please don't use my data to train the model. Then that information will not show up.
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
But
So-
you're asking a person who has no affiliation with the entity to say what a business that employs however many tens of thousands of people will or will not do. And by the way, people make mistakes. So like, oops.
Oof. But that's not a manual thing. I feel like that should be an automatic thing when you're.
And yet, what happens when the grid glitches? Things happen.
So from the and here's just something hearsay that I heard. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but they were talking about if they now they're going to, and maybe this is a big lie, maybe it's fake news, but the idea of it is still pretty scary. And I think that bringing it to light might be an interesting kind of perception into as a lens of what we are going to continue to talk about. But they're saying that if you want to enter the U.S. now, they want you to provide 6 years of social media history.
Mm-hmm.
I was a different person 6 years ago.
Totally.
But the thing is also, anybody that is kind of onboarding themselves onto these sites 6 years ago, 10 years ago, we didn't even understand the scope of data. We didn't understand where it's going. We just assumed that they're not going to hurt us or something like that. The biggest fear that I think maybe in the future, and not sure how it's going to impact people, is yes, you've put in a lot of sensitive information, a lot of ideas. It's also listening, where the microphone might be toggled on. They might be selling that information to whatever, like third party, whatever. I mean, like, how do you even know? How do you even know that they won't just leak everyone and there might be some new rule where it's like, nope, it's out there. Search everybody's stuff. It's, you can access it.
You don't know that. So your question is in a couple of parts, I think. The first part is about whether or not your public statements can legally impede your private movement, right? Does that sound about right? So under the US Constitution, absolutely not. Unless you are a threat, which is what this administration is suggesting that people who have funky social media profiles might be. If you're a threat, then we deal with you like a threat. But if you're just a guy saying some stupid shit, then our Constitution affords you the protection to say some stupid shit. You're not yelling fire in a crowded theater. Go ahead and say some stupid shit. Welcome to our shores. Whether or not that's going to stay the law, like if you had asked me a year ago, I would have laughed at the question. But here we are. The other part of what you're asking is how do we know as we generate data, as we put data into the system, ways in which it might be used for good or for evil in the future? Is there a way we can guide our own consumer behavior? And the way that I would speak to that is suggesting doing some of what you've already done, right? Like any device that you have that is a listening device, if you don't want it to be listening to, then turn it off.
What about the camera? They say that the camera, what is it, that Edward Snowden that used to put the piece of tape on his laptop because he didn't want it. It was off and it was still locked. Is that even a thing?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question. I think what you're asking is, even if I have my camera turned off on my phone, can I still be found, or can people still figure out where I am? And the answer is definitely yes, because your phone, in addition to being a vehicle through which you receive all this data from different apps, is also a machine that is registered with an IP address that is connected to your service provider, and your service provider knows where your IP address is 100% of the time. So if you want to go off the grid, leave your phone at home. And your watch.
Phones are around you too.
Absolutely. And there's not much we can do about that except for going out in costume or what have you. But candidly, whether or not people are responsible with their data and their children's data determines in large part whether I'm going to be hanging out with them anyway. So it's not an easy conversation to have, but I don't want people to know where my kids are.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay, so that's a huge, there's so much tangible advice there, but then also knowing what they are doing and how they're thinking. Mind-blowing for me that the government is actually out to get you more to some degree than corporations are, but I guess, from also what I'm hearing is that that's retroactive. So if you have committed a crime, then they could find something. It's not like, hey, we're predicting that you could predict, commit a crime, which would be kind of like, what is it? Profiling.
It would be. That would be illegal.
Yeah. So that's exactly. So we're not supposed to be profiled. So at least there's some safety there. Okay, so let's move away from that. I think that a lot of people, especially when it comes to AI, have so many questions, right? When it comes to copywriting information, the way that music is also now it's being created digitally online, and like the whole idea of a human owning sort of like this creative process or their own thoughts versus like now people are writing books using ChatGPT and copywriting them. Like I mean, someone recently like wrote an entire book on ChatGPT and then went and copyrighted it. And now it's a copywritten book, and nobody even knew that it was generated in ChatGPT. But also knowing that these aren't human, right? So the issue happens, when it comes to protecting a person's intellectual property, is that you have to be human to protect that property. I mean, am I right? Or is it something that has now shifted and changed?
So in the law up until very recently, the copyright law, which is one of a handful of different types of intellectual property law, the others are patents, trademarks, and trade secrets. But copyright law until very recently was revolved around protecting rights of what the law calls authorship. So authorship could mean writing a song, it could mean writing a book, it could mean performing a unique interpretive dance, but that, right, or something that you've painted. But the generic term authorship covers all of those different types of creators, just for the sake of the rest of the discussion. And so the question of what is an author is really like what you're driving at. And again, like I say, until recently, that wasn't up for much debate because, contrary to your point, it wasn't just humans who could be authors. Businesses who employ humans could be authors of the work done by the humans whom they employ. So like, let's say you sign an employment agreement. You would sign away your rights to authorship in any of the works that you create while you're working for the business. Mm-hmm. Or vice versa, if you've already created a work of authorship and then you're going to let someone else use it for their profit, that's what we call a license agreement, typically, right? So now we're in these weeds with AI creation because the questions start to bubble up. Well, is the person who prompted the tool the author? Is the person who built the tool the author? If two different tools yield two separate responses to the same prompt, are they each an author of the same material? Certainly not, because the product, the work, is different, but the prompt was the same. Almost without taking any steps in any direction, you see where we have some problems, right? So some of the recent jurisprudence, and I'll admit that I'm not up on this the way that I am on privacy law, but some of the recent jurisprudence seems to indicate that works created via an LLM tool or an AI tool might be considered original works of authorship for purposes of the copyright law under certain circumstances.
Wait, so let me so whose is it then? Is it the person who prompted?
I don't know the answer to that yet. Oh. That's the point, is the question really, right? So a lot of times when we get into like a novel issue of law is because the circumstances have changed such that the definition of one of these like basic terms like author is different now. We can't rely on our precedent or even previously written laws, precedent being judge-made law, statutes, right, being written by our legislatures. We can't rely on any of that if the term author now means something different than it meant before. So the jurisprudence right now all of a sudden gets really narrow. What does author mean? Well, it depends on what the definition of is, right? Like these kind of, it's a Bill Clinton joke, but like there's so much even in the definition of copyright. What is an original work? What's a work?
Yeah. So they're still coming up with the definitions to the terminology.
Redefining all these terms that have been fairly solidly defined for a long time. And then the question arises, well, what about the original author of the work, right? What if ChatGPT is trained on all the works of Shel Silverstein, for example, but nothing else? Well, then Shel Silverstein probably, or his estate, he's long dead, but his estate, right, probably has a decent claim against the builder of the LLM for stealing his material. And whoever has created something out of this LLM, well, it's cheating. It's copying Shell. But ChatGPT indexes effectively the whole internet. So who's the author of the whole internet? Nobody.
And then also, do we know that it indexes the whole internet?
No, it doesn't. It wouldn't. But
so essentially, the takeaway from that is, yes, we're still defining. We're still trying to get narrowed and focused. So for anybody that is trying to copyright books off of ChatGPT, go ahead and do it now. Because eventually there is going to be a definition, and because we're in that gray area.
Great way to put it. I wouldn't have put it quite like that.
But what's the repercussion of, say, somebody doing something like, is it like a tap on the wrist, or is it like, hey, I can now go retroactively sue you one day for doing XYZ, or once that mandate comes out, anything effective afterward?
Totally depends on how the law is written. So some laws are written to be prospectively applicable or enforceable, and some laws are written to be retrospectively applicable or retroactively applicable. For the most part, laws pertaining to civil laws are only prospectively effective unless we're trying to remediate some sort of public policy problem. So like sexual harassment claims are a civil matter. Sexual harassment by itself isn't a crime. And so if we make a law about sexual harassment, for example, if I'm not mistaken, Illinois passed a law a couple of years ago removing the statute of limitations for sexual harassment claims, saying, we don't really care how long it's been, like, take your time until you're ready to bring your claim. But most of the time, there's not a good public policy reason to reach back into history and make everybody like update their old contracts, for example, or whatever, right? Like, we'll just say, okay, we know better, we'll do better, we'll go forward, make this applicable into the future.
Okay, so all right, so that gives me a clearer understanding of at least what the scope is, where we are now, what it could be like to kind of reach back into the past, and maybe what we can anticipate in the future. Okay, so last thing before we go, because I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface. I feel like this could be a different podcast. I feel like, this needs to be like a recurring series of, okay, information. Let's have the conversation. But what should someone do right now to protect themselves? Because there are so many things with the cookies that we've discussed and understanding the way that data and privacy works. And also, because the usage is, I guess like, the creativity, the authorship is there on a business front, on a human creative front. There's so many different ways. Of all the things that we've discussed and maybe haven't discussed, what's one major thing that somebody right now that maybe we don't know about, but maybe perhaps from your perception as someone in the legal field that is interfacing with all of these spaces, what's one takeaway and one thing we should do right now to fix?
Back up your data. So with an asterisk, back up your data on a different system than the one it's currently on.
Explain that, please.
Sure. So you have a bunch of photos in your iPhone. We were looking at them earlier. You probably have, I'll make this up, 10,000 photos in your iPhone, and 5,000 of them are screenshots, and a couple hundred of them are selfies, and a bunch of them are of your kids and your family, and a handful of them are from like social events and podcasting things. If you were to lose, I'll pick a near and dear one, the pictures of your children, How upset would you be?
Pretty upset. Yeah.
Okay.
And lose them on all platforms.
That's what I was asking, right? So you just answered the question. What do you mean? Well, don't have all your photos only on your iPhone. Back them up, not just to Apple Photos, but maybe also Google Photos. Because anybody who is a business person or even tried to use the internet a couple weeks ago when AWS was down for like 6 hours will know that even though we feel like this system is here to serve us 24/7, it's really not. It's still run by people. Humans make mistakes and machines still break. So backing up your data on the system that you keep it on simply means if you've been hacked, both copies are hacked. If you've been breached, both copies are breached. If your data disappears, both copies have disappeared. If you lose your iPhone's gone. And that applies from the personal side all the way through enterprise business. Your backups need to be in more than one place, hopefully in more than one format.
Okay. All right. And the key takeaway there is that if you're not doing it, I mean, your information is gone, but from a privacy perspective, does that also apply?
Sure. Not only because it can establish what was yours in the first place, but also because as you are trying to work to remediate the problem, if you're working in the cave ages without any of your information, without any of your accounts, without any of your tools, or maybe you're taking it out of like the pictures realm, right? Like your data, your employee data, your accounting data, then you're dead in the water. You're not even functioning. So as much as you might wish to make moves to preserve privacy, whether that's negotiating with a ransom, like a pirate, or if it's working with some sort of cybersecurity professional to help close up all of your open ports, it's evidence not just from a legal standpoint, but also gives you the framework of what you're going to be rebuilding.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, Lisa, I feel like this deserves another conversation because there's so many questions I could continuously ask you. Thank you so much for being here. This has been extremely enlightening, and it's been giving us like tangible advice of what we need to be doing and also the perspective. So thank you so much for being here. It was an absolute pleasure to have you.
Always wonderful to talk to you. Thank you.